A barefoot teenager, lost in fog on a nameless continent, stumbles into tracks that lead nowhere familiar, but she keeps walking anyway. Most people think ancient humans wandered the world just chasing food or running from danger. But the real reason they risked everything to cross oceans and mountains is stranger, and far more human, than any textbook admits. Here's what most people miss. Survival wasn't just about where you could live, it was about what you couldn't stand to leave unknown. The real engine of ancient travel wasn't hunger, it was a psychological itch, the kind that still makes you check behind a closed door or wonder what's at the end of a dark road. But the catch? That itch wasn't distributed fairly. Some brains were wired to stay put, others to roam. The future of humanity hung on a weird cognitive lottery. Let's meet the first accidental astronauts. Before any map, before any myth, before there was even a word for home. Picture a world with no paths, no GPS, no stories about what's safe. Just a landscape so big, the edges might as well be the end of the universe. Most of us would cling to the one thing we know, our group. But the ones who left, alone or in tiny bands, weren't reckless. They were gamblers. Not in the way you lose money at a casino, but in how your brain weighs risk and reward when nothing is certain. Here's a twist. The urge to explore is genetically linked to the same dopamine circuits that trigger addiction. The same chemical that makes slot machines addictive pushed our ancestors across deserts. That's why, even when every step forward meant more danger, some couldn't resist the pull. But what did they actually see? Not a globe, not even a map. Just a series of puzzles. A river to cross, an animal trail to follow, a mountain that blocked the sun. Every step was a bet. Is the grass greener over that hill, or is it a trap? Here's where it gets weird. Most early travel wasn't a grand odyssey. It was 1,000 tiny decisions driven by micro-anxieties. Not just where's the food, but what if someone else finds it first? The unknown wasn't just scary. It was a resource. If you found it first, your genes won. If you hesitated, you got left behind. This invisible race shaped the way humans moved. Slow, then suddenly fast, as a new trick spread like gossip. Example: the original shortcut, following animal migrations. Not random wandering, smart copying. But most stories skip the psychological sleight of hand. Our ancestors didn't just copy animals. They copied each other, sometimes blindly. It's called social learning, and it's why a single bold explorer could drag a whole group into the unknown without meaning to. But there's a twist. Sometimes the first one out was the least likely to survive. The second or third got the real prize. So why did anyone go first? Sometimes pure mistake. Sometimes personality trait. But often a simple bias. Overestimating the upside. That same optimism bias is what makes us buy lottery tickets or start new companies. It's built in. Now, flip the story. Why didn't everyone just leave? Turns out, most people in any tribe stayed put, anchored by a competing instinct. The same aversion to loss that makes you cling to a bad investment kept most ancient people close to home. If your brain hated uncertainty, you weren't likely to risk the unknown. But that meant you'd always be downstream from someone else's discovery. And here's the punchline. The survival of the human species depended on both types, the brave and the cautious. If everyone left, the group died out. If everyone stayed, they missed the next big thing. The tension powered the spread of humans everywhere. But let's talk about the biggest travel hack of all, memory. Imagine trying to remember every bend in a river, every landmark, every edible plant, without writing anything down. So how did they do it? Songs, stories, and rituals, each one a living GPS. But here's what's wild. The most memorable stories weren't always the most accurate. They were the most emotionally intense. So, a scary story about a lake monster might keep you alive longer than a precise map. That's why ancient travel was shaped by memory bias. Places linked to danger or luck stuck hardest. This wasn't a bug. It was a feature. Exaggerated memories kept groups alive, sometimes at the cost of truth. Still, some humans did what others wouldn't. They crossed literal and psychological lines no one else dared. Take the first people to reach Australia, over 60,000 years ago. No land bridge, no guarantee. Archaeologists can track their route, but not the moment of decision. The leap into black water. The moment when home became maybe. Most likely, it wasn't a plan. It was a series of tiny miscalculations. One more island, just a little farther, until there was no turning back. That's the trick. Humans don't change the world with big leaps. We nudge, drift, and stumble into new places, then pretend it was destiny. But the psychological engine beneath it all? Restlessness. Anthropologists call it migratory urge, but it's more like existential itch, the same force that makes some people move cities every year. And here's the kicker. This urge is not evenly spread. Some populations today have higher frequencies of the DRD47R gene, the so-called explorer gene. Populations descended from long-distance migrants are literally more restless, on average, than those who stayed put. But that's not the whole story. Environment mattered too. When the Ice Age locked land in ice, people became trapped specialists, until the ice melted and the itch returned. So, the spread of humans across the globe was part accident, part genetic roll of the dice, and part environmental roulette. Now, here's a twist you never hear. Most ancient travel was not glorious adventure. It was a desperate move to avoid being the last one left behind. The pull of curiosity was matched by the push of social pressure. If your group moved, you had no choice, unless you wanted to starve alone. So the first global travelers weren't heroes. They were just slightly more uncomfortable with the status quo. But here's a paradox. Once a new place was found, the urge to roam faded fast. Humans are expert settlers until the next wave of restlessness builds. That's why all around the world you find abandoned camps, forgotten trails, and ghost settlements, monuments to our short attention span. Now, let's talk about the most dangerous trip of all, crossing the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas. It wasn't a bridge, just frozen mud and ice, stretching farther than anyone could see. Every step was a bet against the cold. But here's what most people get wrong. No one set out to discover America. They were following animals, rumors, and the tiniest hint of hope. The journey took generations. Most who started never saw the end. But the urge, however irrational, kept the line moving forward. And the stories of their arrival? They didn't talk about destiny. They remembered hardship, luck, and the monsters they met along the way. So, how did ancient humans really travel the world? Not with certainty, not with maps, but with a brain wired to fear missing out more than missing home. And here's the ultimate irony. The very bias that made us risk everything for a new horizon is the same bias that makes us today click next video just to see what's there. We're still chasing the next horizon, only now it's digital. But the core drive, it hasn't changed in 60,000 years. So next time you wonder why you get restless at home, remember, you're the descendant of people who could never sit still. The journey isn't over, but now it's your turn to choose. Settle or see what's just over the next ridge. And if you want to know why some people always seem to crave the new, while others are perfectly happy never leaving home, watch our next video on the psychology of adventurers versus settlers.